Merry Christmas to you all and welcome to Reeltime. Now, I think it's fair to say that 2016 hasn't really been that uneventful. Some for the good reasons, and some not so much. Having said this, 2016 has had its fair share of brilliant movies, so I thought why not make a list of my top 10 of the year. Now, just before I start, I want to emphasise this is all my personal opinion. I'm not saying that categorically these are the best films and some of your favourite films may not have made the list. This could be because I simply thought these 10 films were better, or maybe I just didn't get to see it. There were quite a few films I didn't get to see this year. So without further ado, I present to you Reeltime's top 10 films of 2016. Enjoy.
Number 10.
Kubo and the Two Strings. I have to say, this film was a lot more impressive than what I was expecting. The animation is stunningly beautiful in this film, and I had to look at behind the scenes footage just to get an idea as to how much of it was stop motion. It's got a great story about family, it's got an amazing voice cast, and for a kids movie it really doesn't hold back on the scary themes. I mean, this is an animated film with a lot of class, and it's got Rickon Stark from Game of Thrones in it. I mean, what more could you possibly ask for? And I hope that this is a bright future for this animation studio.
Number 9.
Star Trek Beyond. I have to say, I was really surprised when I found out that this was a box office flop of this year, because I thought it was great. Even though JJ had left to go and do Star Wars, it really doesn't feel out of place in the trilogy. I mean, perhaps you could say the villain is probably the weakest out of the three, but it has all the things that make a great Star Trek film. It's got great action, it's got a great cast, all of them returning, and it's got enough sci-fi mumbo-jumbo to keep the nerds happy, and it's got enough action to keep the non-nerdy people happy. I don't know what the generic name for those lot but yeah, it really doesn't feel out of place in this trilogy. It basically builds on all the things that made them great in the first place. And I gotta say, this film pays a really nice tribute to Leonard Nimoy and Anton Yelchin? I hope I pronounced that name correctly. And it was such a sad loss for the franchise, and, you know, I think Star Trek Beyond really handled their deaths really well. And it just kind of shows that above all the sci-fi and actiony stuff that we come to know in these films, it does have a lot of heart to it. And I hope that this is going to continue in some way despite the loss of Chekhov.
Number 8.
The Jungle Book. This is how you make a live-action adaptation of a cartoon. Oh my god, this film was so enjoyable. Because I like the 1960s cartoon version. I've never thought of it as like one of the big classics of Disney animation, but I always felt the story lacked direction. I always felt like it was a sequence of events that take place, whereas this one, it has a much more rounded story and it has much more rounded characters. I don't know whether perhaps it paid a bit more attention to the original book. I'd probably have to do some more research into that. But having said that, it's got an amazing voice cast. Ben Kingsley, Bill Murray, Scarlett Johansson, they're all incredible as their animal counterparts. And speaking of animals, these are probably the best CGI animals I've ever seen. I cannot believe that they came out of computer. And I think it's good that since it's live action, no live animals were actually harmed in the making of it. So if you can make animals look that realistic and that expressive, you know, the possibilities are pretty much endless, really. Aside from that, it was such an enjoyable film, and I want to give a special shout to Neil Sethi, who played Mowgli. He was really good for a kid his age, and he had literally nothing to act with. I think he's going to go far.
Number 7.
Finding Dory. Oh yes, this one's for 12-year-old me. Oh man, I really enjoyed this film. I mean, to be fair, Finding Nemo was never a film that I felt needed a sequel, and when I heard that it was going to be about Dory, I was thinking, you know, when franchises make sequels about their supporting characters, they normally fall flat on their face. But this one, it was one of those films that really built on what made the first one so great, and it just sort of took it to the next level, really. It's got an engaging story about family, it's got colourful characters, once again, great voice acting, and bloody tear-jerking moments. Those shells, man. Those shells. And if I'm honest, I feel the supporting characters in Finding Dory are a lot better than the ones in Finding Nemo. You know, the Seals, Destiny, Bailey, Hank, they're all just much more memorable for me. And to be honest, I find the humour a lot funnier in this film. I think in a way, the writing of these animated films has actually improved over the past decade, and hopefully it's a sign of better things to come from the studio.
Number 6.
Deadpool. Seriously, what can I say that hasn't already been said? This film was amazing. I mean, admittedly, I didn't know all too much about the character going into this film. All I knew was that he's one of the most famously sort of adult Marvel characters. I knew he loved fourth wall breaks and that he virtually gets everything cut off of him and he comes back to life somehow. He's kind of like Kenny from South Park, in all honesty. But honestly, they couldn't have picked a better man-child to play this character than Ryan Reynolds himself. You can tell how much he adores the character and pretty much everything that Deadpool stands for. And it was just a joy to watch. I mean, if they were ever going to do a big screen version of Deadpool, I don't think they could have done better than this film. And that is just, you know, that says it all, really. And it's fair to say, this film redefines the term fourth wall jokes. I mean, it was utterly fantastic. And I can't wait for the sequel. And I hope they have a budget to bring in more X-Men, because honestly, if they could get Wolverine and that, or even Spider-Man to appear, it would just be incredible. And I cannot wait to see what they do with this.
Number 5.
Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Now, this is one of those films that needed a second viewing, because I originally saw it at a midnight screening. And I remember leaving feeling really disappointed, and I didn't want to be. I really wanted it to be good. So I went to see it again, and thankfully, I really enjoyed this. The way they expand on the wizarding community in America, and it had that perfect blend of a sort of fun, light-hearted story about Newt Scamander's beast and that, but it also had an overriding dark story to it with Percival Graves, Credence, and what's his name? Grindelwald. Grindelwald, that's it. It's a lot of funny names to remember. The characters are really likeable, especially Newt and Jacob. Jacob was the biggest surprise I have had in so long. He was an utter joy to watch. Even though he was the typical comedy sidekick, he wasn't a joke by any means. He had a real character behind him. And honestly, within minutes of seeing him, you're rooting for this character. And I really hope that what is good about this film, they can really build on for the 4 sequels we got to look forward to.
Number 4.
Doctor Strange. Oh man, Marvel, why are you so good? This film was brilliant. It's probably one of the best origin story films I've ever seen, and that is saying something. And I think it says a lot about Marvel that they're able to take heroes like Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, which in terms of the general public, they're quite unknown heroes. I had heard of Doctor Strange, but I knew very little about his origins or what he actually does, who the villains are and that. But this was absolutely fantastic. And it was that different kind of Marvel film. You know, it was all very magic oriented, but it's got a great cast. Benedict Cumberbatch's American accent is brilliant. He doesn't lose any of his natural gravitas on screen. And the visuals are just mind-blowing, honestly. They were absolutely fantastic. Tilda Swinton is amazing. I think she looks great with no hair. Yeah, a bit of an odd compliment to give a woman, but I thought she looked amazing. And typically, in Marvel fashion style, it has great humour, great dialogue, and I can't wait to see how this fits into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because they are just throwing so many heroes at this that it's just going to be an orgasm of, like, nerd gold. It's going to be incredible.
Number 3.
Captain America Civil War. Oh boy, this was bloody amazing. I mean, leaving the Avengers films aside, I think Captain America has the best films. You know, his first film and The Winter Soldier. And Civil War, to be honest, Civil War is kind of more like an Avengers sequel because it has so many of the characters from the Avengers. It may be the sort of B-side of the Avengers, but oh man, it was so good. It had such an engaging story. It didn't do the premise in a cheap way and make Captain America and Iron Man rivals like they can't stand each other. It's just the decisions that they make dictate what they need to do, you know. And then Tony's not doing it because he hates Steve. He's doing it because in his mind it has to be done. There is no other way. And it was handled in such a mature way, but balancing it up with the traditional Marvel humour as well. Ant-Man and Spider-Man utterly steal the show. I knew they were both going to be in it beforehand. And Tom Holland as Spider-Man, I'm just checking to see if I got his name right. Yep, Tom Holland, he was perfect as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And for a change, I genuinely can't wait for what they do with a Spider-Man reboot. It's going to be fantastic. And Ant-Man, what else can I say? He is just amazing. And yeah, it's just, there seems to be no stopping Marvel at the moment. Everything they do just turns out to be gold. And I couldn't be happier for them. They've just redefined the superhero movie and carry on doing it. You guys are amazing.
Number 2.
Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I know we didn't talk about it last year, but I loved The Force Awakens. It was such a breath of fresh air after the horribleness of what George Lucas can do with the franchise. And honestly, Rogue One is a much different Star Wars movie in tone. It's the only standalone one. It doesn't have any Jedis. And it's such a great story about heroism. It's a story I never conceived they would make a film about. But when I heard it, I thought it was genius that someone decided, why don't we actually fill in that gap? And it also fills in the gap about how the rebels are able to blow up the Death Star in the first place, which I always thought was a bit of a sort of cheap plot device, like, oh, that's quite convenient to blow up the Death Star with one shot. But it finally makes sense now, and I am so happy for it. But to be fair, given it's a much darker tone of Star Wars film, it still has humour, it still has good characters, great acting, friggin' amazing action sequences, and Darth Vader is back! And we finally get to see him being a badass, and it is glorious. I mean, admittedly, I would have liked him to have been in the movie more, but honestly, this film was amazing. And just before I finish this up, I want to give my personal tribute to Carrie Fisher, who passed away this week. You brought about such a strong female character, and I never truly appreciated how much this would mean to women all over the world, that you made such a strong character. And honestly, I love the fact that in this film, you finish it off with a single word: hope. May the Force be with you, Carrie. Before I reveal my favourite film of 2016, I would like to take a moment to list out some minor honours for other films. Enjoy.
Best Documentary.
The Beatles, 8 Days a Week.
Best British Film.
Street Cat Named Bob.
Most Pleasant Surprise.
Trolls.
The film I liked that nobody else seemed to.
X-Men Apocalypse.
The film that just about missed out on the top 10 list.
Arrival.
And the number 1 film of 2016?
Zootropolis. Oh yes, Disney. You are amazing again. Oh man, I absolutely loved this film. And it was such a tough call for the number 1 spot, honestly. This and Rogue One, two such different films, but I kind of boiled it down to, out of all the films I love from this year, which one could I watch every single day and I could never get tired of it? And immediately, Zootropolis was the film that came to mind. It's got an amazing lead character. Jennifer Goodwin did such a good job with this character. In fact, the entire cast were brilliant. Jason Bateman, Idris Elba, J.K. Simmons, and all the other guys. They did such an amazing job capturing these characters. And I cannot fault them at all. They were just amazing. And the film's got such a good message on life. Is if you've got a dream, try, just go for it, because I think that message really rings true with a lot of people, especially in my position, who are trying to make their dreams come true. Who would have thought that a Disney movie would deal with racial stereotypes, you know, political corruption, and they make a joke about felony tax evasion? That is amazing. It's incredibly clever for a family film. It's got laughs for the kids and for the adults, honestly. The jokes don't feel like two ends of a spectrum, you know, they're not too dumb for adults and they're not too intelligent for kids. And it was just so damn enjoyable. And honestly, Disney, you'd be fools to not make a sequel to this, because the possibilities are just endless, really. And if you do, I can't wait to see what you do with it. So, that's my top 10 films of 2016. I hope that some of your favourite films were on the list. And once again, I apologise if some of your favourite films were on the list. I may not have seen them, or I just didn't like them as much. You know, I'm not trying to change anyone's minds. You know, this is all just my own personal opinion, and for what it's worth, I hope you enjoyed it at least. Next time, we are going from the best of the best to the worst of the worst. Take care, and have a happy new year.